Hey everybody, it's Obey the Papaya here. I saw a lot of people on YouTube start to do tier lists, and it was pretty interesting. I kind of like how, Soul Reaper, he went one with a more higher ELO PCC style, and I thought it was super interesting. Some things I agree with, some things I disagree with. I saw Joey yours truly, and that was really interesting. There was a few things I personally didn't agree with, but I find that super cool to see the community kind of like, share their opinion. And then, I like the comparison, like people comparing their tier list, what they think is, their best, or, it is biased. Depends on the lanes, depends if you're a flex pick and all that. But I decided to honestly kind of make my tier list. I had people ask before to do one, and I said, what's a better time than now, right? Everyone's releasing theirs. Good to have comparisons. That'll be fun. So I also just did mine pretty much instantly. And I mean, it's subject to change at the same time, but like a disclaimer, right? I'm a mid lane main. I don't play much of everything else. Even though I do have experience on almost every character, I do strictly say mid lane. And I do personally think that it is a tank slash ADC meta. It's a tank meta with having a solid ADC is huge, right? And then, oh, my thing's based on pubs. I want to focus strictly on pub stomp like characters, so that's what we'll focus in on. And I'll kind of describe why I think so, and some are like reasons as if it is like gold tier. So I'm not talking about the highest level of play. I'm not talking about the lowest level of play, but I'm also thinking of people that want to one trick these characters, because that is kind of how it is. If you do want to climb, you do want to look into one tricking. If you're new to the game, you should look into one tricking. So if you one trick this character, I can see yourself climbing is kind of what I'm looking at. So there's going to be bias with mids, there's going to be bias with supports, and we'll discuss that in a way, right? So I'm just gonna go through. I'm gonna go through my list, and the first one is probably gonna be interesting. A lot of people are gonna go, "Man, you're just biased." But let's start off. I think Countess is a top pub stomper. I think she has a potential to completely dominate lane. Because of she's forced to play passive, and until you get into like real high elo, she can pretty much dominate any lane. Not many people really know how to contest her. I'm not gonna go through like any how to counter or anything. Just overall what I see, right, in terms of wanting to climb. But she has sustain. She has not necessarily an escape, but she has reposition. She has a gap closer. She has a stun. She has AoE. Her AoE can go through walls. She's squishy and she can get caught out, but that's once again, if you're one tricking and you kind of learn these techniques, I think she's really dang good, for climbing. Greystone, he's a W key champion right now. He has a troublesome early game if you do take him off lane, right? But Greystone, when it comes to like jungle, he doesn't have CC. But if you just play the game out, this guy, the only issue that I see people really take, and it's actually one of the reasons why a lot of people are in the tier two list. People with Greystone tend to W key so hard that the team doesn't follow. So of course we say 1v9, but your team is still can be supportive. They can still help just a bit, in terms of distraction, throwing some damage. And Greystone, he's solid. He has basically two lives. He outputs a ton of damage. He can chase really well. He has a lot of items that can build on him that are really good, as well as to counter other characters, right? Um, Next is Drongo. So I'd say carries are pretty much, really dang good overall. But Drongo, he's provided with a silence. He's provided with some solid shred. He's provided with, I think it's percent health based damage. He has very good clear. He's just a very solid ADC, and I think everyone should learn. These are technically characters I would say everyone should learn. To at least clear out every single lane. Um, but Drongo's solid. He does have escape. Throws out a ton of damage, and he's wild as an ADC and pretty easy to use. Next is Faye. Even though Faye has a lot of counters due to anti cleanse, she outputs so much damage. Her clear is really quick. Um, She's AoE based. Her ultimate, getting one single ultimate could completely change the fight. It's outrageous how good she honestly is. The problem is she does have no escape, which is like borderline why I say she could be tier two. But when you one trick her and you kind of learn like how do I prevent from getting ganks and play it safe, you know, she's you can definitely get to the point where like ganks aren't too much of an issue, and you can output so much damage. Murdoch is the next one. ADC, long range, has a lot in his kit. He has one of the highest base damage on just on his left mouse button, or your regular shot, your basic attack. I think he's a 95%, 90%. And his ultimate can really secure kills. So it is kill steals, but that is what's going to stack him up. He has a pretty good wave clear. His R&B is able to push back people as well as do a ton of damage, as well as reset the basic. His kit's really strong, and the only once again, as you learn how to play him and one trick him, he can actually be a very very solid carry. Chimera, relatively easy jungler, outputs so much damage, can tank so much, has pretty decent clear, has a stun, has a gap closer, doesn't have an escape, but hopefully you're just dominating. He can solo objectives. He's just a top tier jungler, and I still think even with item changes and whatnot, even the changes to his R&B, and a slight heal nerf, he's a monster. Richter is a little bit iffy just because his hook is so dependent, right? But that's it. His hook is so insane, right? That if he lands as a support, as an offlaner, as a jungler, like you're getting a kill. He just uses his entire kit. Hence why I think he's a little bit. I think he's actually broken more than overpowered. Meaning that I think his kit is actually broken, as in busted. I would like to see a kit change. So, but he's a monster. Even if you do miss the hook, he can still provide solid amount of CC. He can provide a ton of peel. Tank meta, is killing it. You know. Um, Next on the list is Steel. So the only con with Steel is his damage, but he is 100% capable of gap closing and soloing an ADC, which in reality is monstrous. That is what your goal is, especially late. He's super tanky, has a lot of CC, has a lot of gap close, has escapes. He can completely annihilate any range, attack with his E. He's a monster, and he's a threat. Now, like I said, the only con is his damage output compared to, Chimera and whatnot. Um, like, or even Richter. It's less, but he's still capable of just staying in the fight and literally 1v5ing the entire enemy team just sitting there. Like he can stay alive for so long. So as long as you're the one taking the damage, hopefully your team, even if they're inting, they can kind of get some damage output out, And his laning phase is pretty safe. Is his character design is, in theory, you do not need items to do good with him. His stuns will always be there. His knockups will always be there. His escape will always be there. You do not need items to necessarily use his kit, right? Twin Blast, probably once the bug is fixed, I think he's one of the top ADCs in the game. I just say it because he outputs so much damage. I played him today, yesterday, and he just does so much damage. He's good at being a solo ADC. His clear is so ridiculously fast. He shreds tanks. There literally is nothing bad to say about him. He's just a monster. Um, so we'll look at the tier twos now. Now the tier twos, once again, all these characters are honestly pretty close. This is just me being like trying to be picky, but I would say you could, in theory, bias everyone one tier up. You could, right? It's dependent on skill and all that. This is kind of just what I'm thinking, me personally, right? My opinions. Tier 2, Crunch. Crunch, also in my opinion, has a broken kit. He's ridiculous. The only reason, honestly, why I put him on Tier 2 is because the amount of people that play Crunch tend to W key way too hard to where he's not tanky enough naturally to 1v5, but he's pretty close, but you need to just not W key it into stupid situations, which in my opinion is what he has. He has solid escape if you just want to push lanes. He can clear jungle really. He can play jungle and off lane, so he can do a really good job. Confusing the enemy. Where is he gonna go? Same thing with Richter. Same thing with Steel. Where are these people gonna go? Right. Same thing with Greystone, and that is very strong. Not for the enemy, not really able to find the perfect counter. That is very important. But that's the only thing I'd say about Crunch is that outputs a lot, heals a lot, but I feel like you tend to W key a little too hard with him. Next is Fang Mao, and Fang Mao is phenomenal as an AD assassin. His kit's pretty simple to use. It's easy to master. Sorry, easy to learn. It is hard to master, but it's not necessarily too bad. The only thing is he is squishy, right? So relative to every other AD, you know, he can output a ton of damage, but he is pretty squishy. So that's the only reason why I didn't really put him on a tier one, just because if you do get caught out, unless you get your RMB, like you're pretty much gonna get stuck. You're pretty much gonna get kind of annihilated. One form is CC catching you off. After RMB, you're pretty much gonna die. But I mean, still, you play it really smart. If the ADC is fed and you kill the ADC, then all you have to worry about is tanks, maybe the mid laner, right? Um, so next on the list is Decker. Now, this is the one thing. Supports, so you'll notice I have a lot of the supports are kind of down. It's because supports aren't carry worthy. The only time a support can be carry worthy is they're outputting damage. So like a Decker that builds a bit of magic power, or starts Time Warp or something, they can provide damage to where they're able to carry a little bit, but her kit is so strong as a support, as a team, that she single-handedly, similar to Richter, can turn a fight, with her entire kit. She's very strong. She helps out. She has one of the best ways of helping push dual lane, setting up ganks for dual lane, escapes even. Like she's just overall too good to not say that she's tier two. If you have to absolutely go support, and you want to try to climb with her or climb up as a support, it's gonna be Decker. So Revenant is insane damage output. He does have his ultimate, which allows him to ult someone if he needs to escape. But that's the thing, right? If he does get caught out, he is gonna be in trouble. Otherwise, I mean, he could be a tier one. It's just that he doesn't really have an escape. He doesn't have fast damage output for clearing. It's very predictable to know what he's gonna do, right? But he's a lock-on kit. He's very strong, pretty, relatively easy to farm. Has pretty good sustain, So overall, I would say Revenant. You could bump him up a tier one if you become really good as you one trick him. It's just that one thing of not having the escape except on the ultimate. So Gideon is a tier two. I like Gideon a lot. I think his output is really good, right? But the one con I'd say with Gideon is it's kind of like he can throw out a lot of Qs and R&Bs and output a ton of damage, right? But I still don't see him being 100% carryable, because if he doesn't have his E, he's pretty much dead. If he uses the E and people follow him, or he gets stunned out of ult, he's kind of donezo, but he outputs a ton of damage. The one thing I do like about Gideon a lot for pub stomp type stuff is it gets you out of any scenario. In your laning phase, you in theory should never die. Put a ward, like you can aggressively put a ward in front of you, behind you, whatever, and you just kind of escape. Use your portal. Don't go too aggressive without your portal. You see the jungler, instantly leave, because if they use a gap closer, they're gonna still be kind of slow, right? And it's just good overall. You should learn Gideon if you're not a mid laner, because his kit is actually pretty basic, and he can output a ton of damage, and he's relatively safe. And I would say his ultimate is very strong, but you want to be careful of not getting caught out with it. And that's what I see. I see a lot of people getting caught out with ult. Do they go true silver and they reduce damage, or do they not really look into using their ult? That's kind of what I would say is the Gideon tech. All right, so next on the list, this one's a little interesting, of course, because he is new, but I really do think he is pretty outputs a good amount of damage. He can be flexed, although I don't recommend him much in off lane. But he's relatively simple, and man, in team fights, he can go pretty hard. You have to position yourself properly, right? Now, this is probably the only other character on the list I could say, I mean, we're still going down it, that could actually go down to tier three. I'd say it's still learning phase. I've had pretty good luck with him, and I feel like his overall damage is pretty wild. His cooldowns are pretty low in terms of RMB and E. But he does provide a lot to the team. That knock up ult, you have to position yourself properly, can be used as peel. You can be support number two for your ADC. and as well as just like having a relatively easy laning phase of just farming and having an absolute insane amount of farm, you know. Um, so next, I would say is Grux. So the one issue I'd say with Grux is it's similar to kind of like Crunch, and and it's that W key too hard. He outputs so much damage. His healing isn't necessarily as great. He does better when there's more enemies and he catches them off guard, like not necessarily to engage a fight, but in the middle of a fight, maybe after a fight. But I see a lot of people tending to engage with Grux. But, you know, he has a lot of output, but he shouldn't, that's the one thing. I think that he could be a monster because in lane, none of his abilities attract aggro, so except his basic attack. So it's really good for, basically putting pressure in lane, you know, unlike Greystone, who basically he has to left click, and if he hits you, then he's gonna aggro minions, right? Grux is different. He clears lane really fast, and he's gonna put a lot of pressure on you without dragging aggro, and he's gonna be able to apply bleeds on you. It's just that his kit is in a somewhat weird spot of just, you know, people being a little too aggro, not positioning properly or knowing when to go in. But learning him and like one tricking him and really getting used to it, I think he could be an absolute monster. Um, then Sereth's on the list. Sereth, a lot of people say it's the Master Yi of Predecessor, and she is really strong. Only reason why I didn't really put her in tier one is because of she's very squishy. I play Howie's into Sereth because once I time that Sereth out of her Q, her, she's basically dead. That's it. If she's able to just throw output damage on you, you're donezo. And one form of CC does mess with her, but she has a lot of capability in solo queue without the good comps, without the thinking to pub stomp and really become a solid jungler. Um, Next on the list is Kalari. So Kalari is in a weird spot where you can kind of flex with her, right? But in mid elo, it's not really going to happen. Now, a lot of people have issues with Kalari being squishy, but if you one trick her and you learn her kit, she is so dominant with just having the ability to be invisible. Be invisible, gank lanes from God knows, where, and just output a ton of damage. She's gonna burn flashes. Uh, you know, she has pretty good sustain with her Q healing. And it's a one thing. I would say that you have to have the skill level on her. She's a harder champ to play, but she just outputs so much damage, and her invincibility, in my opinion, is very broken. Um, Next on the list is Morgish. So it's Countess, so Countess, Faye, and Morgish. I think are my only mids. Oh, and Wraith. Um, so Morgish, it's just because she throws out so much damage. She has pretty good escape with her E. She gets to go through everybody, and her Q is AOE. She does so much damage, and I think that if you focus in on her and you realize that her entire playstyle is, based on position, then I think she's one of the best people to carry, to carry a lot of games. It's the one thing is her positioning. She's squishy. She's a mid laner. Mid laners are a bit, I would say, on the iffier side of being the hard carries currently. But the one con is that a crystalline can ruin her against the tank. So tanks can murder a Morgish pretty easily. But in terms of killing the squishy, oh, super super easy to kill the squishy. Um, just she's very monstrous. Next on the list, so Wraith. So this is the one thing about Wraith. He honestly would be a tier one, especially with this patch. But he's skill reliant. If you cannot hit that RMB, if you cannot stack the Qs, right? He is going to be he's going to be useless. He could be tier 5 if you're missing that stuff. Hence why I personally put him on a tier 2, because if you one trick him and you learn him, he's an absolute god in my opinion. I think he outputs so much damage. And you're able to shoot through walls, you're able to poke, you're able to basically one hit jungle minions, at certain points to easily steal. It's insane how much damage. It's insane that how he can pull people back. Like He's so crazy. You know, I would recommend watching my videos to like really get an idea of why I think he's one of the best, mid laners currently. And if you one trick him, he can be a solid pump stomper. Um, Next on the list is the Zarus. So Zarus is similar to Grux, where it's because Zarus has such a strong laning phase to where he doesn't have to aggro minions. He literally can punish you. Then when he decides on wanting to aggro minions, he'll back off and he'll heal all the HP back up. I do not think he actually has any issue going with anyone off lane. I think he punishes literally every single offlaner. I accept maybe a Grux, and that's barely, honestly, because Zarus can just escape with the movement speed, escape, the stun, that's basically it. But he's a monster. He's basically can be built as an assassin or a bruiser. It kind of depends. So you have like a build style, two build paths you can decide on, depending on the team comp and how you're dominating. And it's pretty easy to differentiate. To switch. Oh, instead I want to go this one. You can easily do that with him. Now tier two, Muriel. Muriel is interesting because that is actually the next support. If you learn a Muriel, she is probably one of the best supports in the entire game right now. She counters the only thing besides phase. She's one of the only people, in my opinion, to kind of counter a Richter because of her shield, because of her movement, because of her slow, right? It takes a bit for her to climb up, but holy crap, is she so useful and so devastating in the hands of a good player of one tricking and learning her. She's absolutely insane. So like that's the one thing. That is why I put her on a tier two. Technically, she'd be closer to tier two, tier three, but I put her in tier two because I've seen some good Muriels, and they're not necessarily higher elo, but holy crap, do they just put so much pressure as well as keeping you safe, you know? That's what I see from her. So now we'll go down to the tier three, four, five side. Now remember, in theory, all these characters can be solo characters and you really learn them, right? But I wouldn't say they're the most optimal, the ideal scenarios, right? So we'll start off with the Narbash. Now, Narbash, what I see from Narbash is they heal a lot late game, right? They have a really solid stun, pretty easy to hit, have good movement speed, but that ultimate takes so dang long for it to work and it can get canceled. And he has no lane pressure early. Early game is so important in any bracket because of mental tilt. You can't have your ADC get mentally tilted. You can't just sit back and play passive. That's the one con of the Narbash support. Laning phase is very tough. Um, Next, I have Howitzer. Now, I love Howitzer. I enjoy him. I am so glad they nerfed him compared to what he was before because he was just such a cringe person. But ever since then, I started playing him, and he is fun. He's enjoyable. But his level of pub stomp, he can dominate a mid lane. He can dominate an ADC. But to physically pub stomp, it's tough. It is tough for him to do it. He is not necessarily single target, but he can burst really quick. But then after that, he's so dependent on his ult for repositions and his E, and they're both fairly long cooldown, but it puts him out of commission. That's the one con I see with Howitzer. Puts some good pressure, but he doesn't have the best wave clear. He can match up if he uses his skills, but then and his passive gives him mana, but then you're gonna miss out on the poke advantage you have, and it's just a little bit tough with Howitzer. I wouldn't say he's the top pub stomper, or mid lane or anything like that. I put him a bit lower. So Kira, now this is probably where some people might disagree. I only say it because Kira doesn't have much in her kit. Basic attacks, her ultimate is fairly useless, like compared to what everything is. You can have a good ultimate, just overall. You get CC'd very easily. It's a very small radius relative to things. And basic attacks, she does better basic attacking, right? And her kit's fairly simple. It just doesn't provide too much to the team, kinda. You had a really nice slow. She does have aggression, but like it's tough-ish. Currently the bug gives her an issue with stuns and the ability Q, but I say like there's just better ADCs. That's mainly it. There's just better ADCs. Now, Rampage is a good jungler, but I think his carry potential has decreased a bit. He has really solid ganks. He can output a ton of damage, but once again, you're just putting it up against other junglers. he's kind of fallen off right now, right? He is tanky. He does have a really strong CC, but just compared to other junglers is kind of why I put him on tier 3. He could be a tier 2, but it's just like I said, it's the other junglers I'm comparing him at this point, right? He's very tanky. He follows the tank meta. He still outputs damage. Just there's better junglers. Bellica. Now this one people might question me. I'm biased because I think Bellica is boring as hell, and she is really strong. But I just think that overall for pub stomping, she's very dependent on her Q. If that Q isn't up or if it's missed, even if you have time warp and time flux and all that stuff, it's tough. It is very tough, in my opinion, to carry with a Bellica. Hence why I do have her on a tier 3. She can be a tier 2, you know. It's just that she is on the single target side. It's not she's not a single target. She's multi-target. All the stuff is AoE, but it's it's hard-ish to kind of get the stacks going. This is a 1v9 scenario where you're biased to need to carry your team. It's iffy. She can definitely do it. Hence why, like I said, she's very close to a tier 2. Just preferably, in my opinion, I put her down to tier 3. Um, Sparrow. So everyone knows Sparrow. She outputs a crap ton of damage, but she has no escape. You kind of need a phase to do super good with her, and you just need to wait till late game. But how often? What is the mental tilt? What's gonna happen there? You can't directly carry with her expecting every single game to go late, expecting you to have solid escapes, especially when Richter, Chimera, those people are prominent right now. Those are it, right? Kind of why I put her on tier 3. But other than that, she could honestly be tier 1 if you have a good duo. If you have a phase, tier phase and Sparrow shoot up to tier 1. Like literally both of them in a duo is flawless. Um, so next on the list is Shinbi. Shinbi, she is solid. I enjoy playing Shinbi. The con I have with Shinbi is one form of CC without her RMB, she's kind of dead. You can build her tanky, you're gonna miss out on the damage for killing. She outputs a lot of damage when she's squishy, but she has nothing to sustain herself. Her E isn't very. Her E comes back with a shield, but it doesn't sustain too much. It's just maybe if they gave her some like invul when she has her E active, because she just gets caught out and she can get really punished. But she does output a ton of damage. It's just that there are better laners in the off lane. There are better junglers, you know, that you can take that follow the meta currently. Now, Sevrog I put as tier 3 because Sevrog is more of a late game character. He has a very strong kit. I like to say he's over kitted for high elo. He's ridiculously strong at high elo. But overall for pub stomping, unless you have a solid mental and know how to farm super good, you could bump him up to a tier 2, right? But it's just that overall, how often, it's better to have instant damage in pubs. It's better to just be in the mindset of just kind of dominating. And that is why I do rank a lot of the tier 1s. There's just a lot of damage output, a lot of instant damage, right? Sev takes time, takes a lot of time. Even the output damage, it takes time. So that is why I put him on a tier 3. It's I'd say it's a relatively strong tier 3 in my opinion. So next, tier 4. Tier 4, I put FaZe. Now, FaZe is very strong, but she's not a carry. She can't carry a game. She can't. I just, out of all of them, she doesn't do much damage. She's really good with the Sparrow. It's probably the only time I'd say that you could put her up into a tier 3, probably still. It's just because, maybe a tier 2, because it really depends on Sparrow more than her. But only with Sparrow, really. And she has her potential. You need the jungler to know how to roam into that. And that is not you 1v5ing. That is not you 1v9ing, right? So hence why I put her on a tier 4. Next is tier 5. Tier 5, Gadget. Gadget is strong. Do not get me wrong on this. She is strong. She is strong when people know what Gadget does and how to play around a Gadget. She is probably a tier 1, tier 2. Problem is, you're not going to get that in pubs. You won't. She's damage over time. There are shields. There are ways to stop her simply her Q. There's ways to escape her ultimate. You need to have a team that knows how to play into a gadget ult, to know how to play into the zoning that she provides. Hence why like I said, I rate the gadget a tier 5. I think overall she's could be even worse than FaZe. Like that's kind of it.
these are my opinions, you know. So I like to hear what you guys think, see what everyone else thinks, compare it with everyone else's tier lists, you know. And I'm interested in it, and I think I'm definitely curious to see what you guys think, you know. And you could carry with a lot of these characters. These characters, they're actually they're relatively fairly balanced with some minor changes I would like to see in hard CC and invisibility. But everyone is actually done pretty well in my opinion in Predecessor, you know. And hey, glad to have the game back, you know, and have PlayStation, everyone come back. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. It was fun to make this video. I was overall trying to find a time when to make it. I've been trying to focus on guides. I'm hoping to get a character guide out soon for mid lane. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, but on that note, take it easy. Have a good one. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. I stream on Twitch and YouTube. I multi-stream. So you can follow me there. It should be in the description. And I'll catch y'all later.